By the spring of 1944, the Battle of the Atlantic was a 5-year-old scar across the face of the earth, a brutal, unforgiving war of attrition fought in the dark, icy waters of the North Atlantic. In this vast grey wilderness, the German U-boat commander was the undisputed apex predator. He was a member of an elite, almost mythical brotherhood, the Grey Wolves, handpicked by Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz. He was a master of the silent hunt, a patient, calculating assassin who saw the world through the crosshairs of a periscope. From the cramped, claustrophobic, sweat and diesel-scented confines of his U-boat, he viewed the Allied war effort with a cold, professional contempt. The lumbering merchant ships that formed the convoys were his cattle, and the small, mass-produced American destroyer escorts assigned to protect them were nothing more than annoying, yapping sheepdogs. He had seen it all. He had dodged hundreds of depth charges, survived relentless, days-long hunts by British corvettes, and sent tens of thousands of tons of Allied shipping to the deep, dark bottom of the ocean. He believed that no soft, inexperienced American ship captain could outsmart him. He believed that in the dark, silent depths the U-boat was the perfect weapon, and he was its perfect master. And then, one night, one of these elite hunters, a veteran commander named Hartwig Lux, captain of the successful U-boat U-66, encountered an American sheepdog that decided to fight like a rabid, cornered wolf. The U-66 was a proven killer, a Type 9C U-boat with a long and proud history of sinkings. On the night of May 6, 1944, prowling the warm, dark waters off the Cape Verde Islands, it was stalking an American convoy. Captain Lux, a veteran of numerous patrols, spotted a target through his periscope and prepared for a textbook nighttime surface attack, but a flicker of motion, a shadow in the dark, alerted him. He had been detected. An American destroyer escort, the USS Buckley, was turning towards him. For Lux, this was a familiar game of cat and mouse. He would crash dive, run silent, and use his experience to evade the clumsy American hunter, living to fight another day. But the captain of the Buckley, a man named Brent Abel, was not playing games. What followed was not a brief encounter, but a relentless 5-hour duel to the death. The Buckley hounded the U-66 with a grim tenacity. Abel's sonar team was expert, keeping a constant ping on the submerged submarine, never letting it escape. The Buckley dropped pattern after pattern of depth charges, the underwater explosions rattling the U-boat's hull, shattering light bulbs and fraying the nerves of the German crew. Finally, starved of air, its batteries critically low, and with damage mounting, the U-66 was forced to make a desperate choice: surface and fight, or suffocate in the depths. Lux chose to fight. Surfacing at night gave the U-boat a fighting chance. It was a heavily armed warship carrying a powerful 105mm deck gun and multiple anti-aircraft cannons. The German plan was simple: surface, man the guns, and in the chaos, use their superior firepower to cripple the lightly armed American destroyer, then slip away in the darkness. The German sailors, trained for this moment, scrambled up the conning tower ladder and onto the wet, pitching deck of the surface submarine, confident they could win a gunfight against this lone American ship. This was their first shock. The USS Buckley did not stand off at a safe distance and engage in a gentlemanly gun duel. It did something that violated every rule of naval combat, something no sane captain was supposed to do. Abel aimed his ship's bow directly at the U-boat and, ordering all engines ahead flank, charged at full speed. On the bridge of the U-66, Captain Lux and his officers stared in disbelief. This was madness. This wasn't a naval tactic, it was a suicidal medieval ramming attack. He screamed orders, trying to turn his sluggish boat, but it was far too late. With a horrifying, deafening screech of twisting metal and shattering steel, the sharp bow of the Buckley slammed into the U-boat, cutting deep into its pressure hull just behind the conning tower. The two vessels were locked together, grinding and groaning against each other in the dark Atlantic, trapped in a fatal embrace. This was the Germans' second and more profound shock. Their U-boat was crippled, pinned, and sinking. Their only option was to abandon ship. But instead of jumping into the dark, shark-infested water, the German sailors, seeing the American ship's deck just a few feet away, made a fateful, arrogant decision. Armed with their submachine guns and rifles, they decided to do the unthinkable. They would board the American destroyer. In a final, defiant act, they would swarm the American ship, capture it, and sail it to a friendly port. What happened next was not a naval battle. It was a scene from a bloody 18th century pirate movie. It was a chaotic, brutal, hand-to-hand street fight on the rolling steel-plated deck of a warship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The American sailors on the Buckley, many of whom had never seen combat before, were stunned to see German soldiers, the feared grey wolves of the Atlantic, scrambling onto their forecastle. They were mostly engineers, signalmen and cooks, not trained Marines. But their reaction was pure, unadulterated American ingenuity and fury. There was no time to get to the main armory, so they fought with anything and everything they could find. The ship's cooks emerged from the galley, not with rifles, but with heavy, scalding hot ceramic coffee mugs, which they hurled with incredible accuracy at the heads of the boarding Germans. Signalmen grabbed the heavy, lead-weighted books used for classified codes and used them as brutal, effective clubs. Men working the 3-inch guns, having fired all their ready ammunition, began pulling the hot, empty brass shell casings from the deck and swinging them like baseball bats, cracking them over German helmets with sickening thuds. One sailor grabbed a fire axe. Another used a fire hose to try and blast the boarders back into the sea. The Germans, who had expected a disciplined, predictable, and perhaps even fearful naval response, were completely and utterly shocked. This wasn't a battle. It was a chaotic bar brawl. This wasn't a professional navy. It was a mob of enraged farmers. The supposedly soft, undisciplined Americans were fighting with a savage, improvisational ferocity they had never imagined. The German boarding party was cut to pieces. Some were shot, some were clubbed to death with shell casings, and many were simply thrown overboard by the sheer ferocity of the American counterattack. The U-66, mortally wounded and still stuck to the side of the Buckley, began to sink faster. Captain Abel, realizing his own ship was in danger of being pulled down, managed to back his engines away just as the U-boat slipped beneath the waves for the last time, taking its veteran commander and many of its crew with it. When the sun rose, the crew of the USS Buckley looked at their ship. It was battered, bruised, its bow twisted, and its decks littered with the evidence of the unbelievable primitive fight. They had just participated in one of the strangest and most brutal naval encounters of the entire war. The German U-boat captains had laughed at the small, mass-produced American destroyer escorts. They had believed in their own superiority, in their rigid tactics, and in the unwritten rules of submarine warfare. But on that night, the crew of the USS Buckley had taught them a lesson written in blood and coffee stains, that for Americans there was only one rule in a fight: you win. And if that means turning a naval battle into a street fight with whatever is at hand, that's exactly what you do. For the shocked survivors of the U-66 pulled from the water, it was a lesson they would never forget.